The castle stood on the edge of Portland, Oregon, hidden beneath layers of fog and ancient enchantments that made mortals instinctively turn away. Inside its obsidian halls, where candlelight flickered against walls that had witnessed centuries, Queen Morgana paced before the arched window overlooking the rain-soaked city below. Her crimson gown trailed behind her like blood on marble, and her pale hands clutched a silver chalice she hadn't drunk from in hours. "She still won't speak," whispered Seraphine, the Queen's most trusted advisor, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. "The healers have tried everything. Ancient spells, blood rituals, even forbidden incantations from the old world." Morgana's violet eyes that had seen empires rise and crumble, filled with a pain no immortal should bear. 8 years, she whispered. 8 years of silence. My daughter, my precious Isolde, locked in a prison I cannot break. In a chamber 3 floors below, surrounded by velvet curtains and shelves lined with dusty grimoires, sat the child in question. Isolde was impossibly pale, even for vampire kind, with hair black as a raven's wing and eyes that seemed to hold entire universes of unspoken words. She sat perfectly still on her cushioned chair, a porcelain doll that breathed but never smiled, never cried, never spoke. Maids entered cautiously, bringing her meals of warm blood mixed with honey, sustenance she consumed mechanically, without joy or resistance. They spoke to her gently, desperately, hoping today would be different. It never was. Isolde would simply stare through them, as if seeing something beyond the physical realm that held her captive in silence. The Queen had summoned every mystic, every witch, every ancient vampire scholar from across the continent. They arrived with confidence and left with failure etched on their faces. Some claimed the child was cursed by a rival coven. Others whispered she carried the weight of a prophecy too terrible to voice. One old warlock from Louisiana suggested she had seen something during her birth, something from the space between life and death, that had stolen her voice forever. None of them were right. None of them understood. Across the city, in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in northeast Portland, Daniel Carter was preparing breakfast for his 6-year-old daughter, Emma. The kitchen was small but clean, filled with Emma's colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator and the warm smell of scrambled eggs. Daniel moved with practiced efficiency, a man who had learned to be both mother and father since his wife's death 3 years ago. "Daddy, can I have extra cheese?" Emma asked from the table, swinging her legs and clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Extra cheese for my extra special girl," Daniel replied, forcing cheer into his voice despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. He'd worked a double shift at the warehouse last night and had another job starting at the community center in 2 hours. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, but Emma's smile, that was everything. Daniel was 32 but looked older, with dark circles under his hazel eyes and hands calloused from manual labor. His brown hair was perpetually disheveled, and his clothes were worn but clean. He wasn't educated or wealthy or particularly special. He was just a man trying to survive, trying to be enough for the little girl who depended on him completely. "Are we going to park today?" Emma asked hopefully. Daniel's heart twisted. "Not today. Sweetheart, Daddy has to work. But Mrs. Chun will watch you," and she said something about baking cookies. Emma's face fell slightly, but she nodded with the resignation of a child who had learned too early that life required sacrifice. "Okay, Daddy." That afternoon, while Emma was safely with their elderly neighbor, Daniel reported to his second job at the Morrison Community Center. He mopped floors, repaired broken equipment, and set up chairs for the evening support group meetings. It was mindless work, but it paid the bills and kept the lights on. As he was emptying trash bins near the administrative offices, he overheard a conversation that would change everything. "I'm telling you, Margaret, it's the strangest request we've ever received," said Carol, the center director, her voice hushed but urgent. "A representative from some wealthy estate family called. They're looking for someone ordinary, someone with a child, someone who understands loss. They're willing to pay an extraordinary amount just for a consultation." "Sounds like a scam," Margaret replied skeptically. "That's what I thought. But they've already transferred $10,000 to our account as a donation, no strings attached. They said if we could connect them with the right person, there'd be more, much more." Daniel froze, his hand gripping the trash bag. $10,000. That kind of money could mean medical insurance for Emma, a better apartment, maybe even cutting back to one job, so he could actually see his daughter grow up before his better judgment could stop him. He knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, Miss Carroll. I couldn't help but overhear. I have a daughter, and I've known loss. If there's any way I can help." Carroll turned, surprise crossing her features. She studied Daniel for a long moment, this tired, honest-faced janitor who worked 2 jobs and never complained. Something in his eyes, some quality of genuine kindness worn smooth by hardship, made her decision. "Let me make a call," she said softly. 3 hours later, as the October sun set behind Portland's skyline and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Daniel found himself standing before an ornate iron gate he'd never noticed before, despite living in this city his entire life. The address had led him to what appeared to be an abandoned industrial area, but the gate before him was clearly ancient and impossibly elaborate, decorated with symbols that seemed to shift in the fading light. A woman appeared from the shadows, tall, elegant, with eyes that reflected starlight. "Seraphine, Mr. Carter?" Her voice was melodious, but carried an edge of desperate hope. "Thank you for coming. Please, follow me. Time is of the essence." "Wait," Daniel said, his practical nature fighting against the strangeness of it all. "What is this about? Who needs help? And why me?" Seraphine turned, and in the twilight he could see the truth of what she was. The slight points of her canines, the preternatural stillness of her posture, the age in her eyes that no human could possess. "Because, Mr. Carter, you are the first person in 8 years who asks what the child needs rather than what the situation demands. You are the first to offer help before knowing the reward. And that," she said with something that might have been tears glistening in her ancient eyes, "is precisely what makes you different from every creature of power who has failed before you." The gate swung open silently, revealing a path that seemed to descend into mist and mystery. Daniel thought of Emma, of the money that could change their lives, of the inexplicable pull he felt toward whatever waited in that darkness. He stepped forward. The path led not down, as physics suggested, but somehow inward, through veils of enchantment that made his skin tingle and his heart race. When the mist finally cleared, Daniel found himself standing in a courtyard of impossible beauty, surrounded by architecture that blended Gothic grandeur with something older, something that predated human civilization. And there, descending a cascade of stone steps, her crimson gown flowing like liquid rubies, was Queen Morgana herself. She was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure, a creature of such power that the air around her seemed to vibrate with potential energy. But when she looked at Daniel, really looked at him with those violet eyes, what he saw beneath the majesty was something startlingly familiar, the exhausted desperation of a parent who would give anything to help their child. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, "I am told you are father." "Yes, ma'am. My daughter Emma. She's 6. And you would do anything for her?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Anything." Morgana's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Then perhaps you can understand what I am about to ask. My daughter, Isolde, has not spoken since her birth. We have exhausted every magical remedy, every ancient cure, every possible supernatural intervention. They have all failed. And yet, when I reached out to the human world in desperation, seeking something I could not name, every sign, every divination, every whisper from the spaces between pointed to one simple truth. The answer lies not in power or magic, but in something we immortals have forgotten." "What's that?" Daniel asked, his janitor's uniform suddenly feeling absurdly out of place in this realm of shadows and sovereignty. "Humanity," Morgana whispered. "Simple, mortal, genuine humanity. Will you meet my daughter?" Daniel nodded, and Seraphine led him through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves, past portraits of individuals who watched with living eyes, until they reached a door carved with scenes of moonlight and roses. Inside, sitting in her eternal stillness, was Isolde. She was smaller than he expected, more fragile, with an otherworldly quality that made her seem like a watercolor painting, beautiful but somehow not entirely there. When her eyes met his, Daniel felt his breath catch. There was such intelligence in that gaze, such trapped awareness, like someone screaming behind soundproof glass. But there was something else, too. Something he recognized from a mirror on his worst days. The profound loneliness of being fundamentally misunderstood. Daniel knelt slowly, bringing himself to her eye level. He didn't reach for her, didn't invade her space. He simply sat a comfortable distance away and spoke. "Hi, Isolde. My name is Daniel. I hear you don't like talking much. That's okay. You know what? Sometimes I don't either." Behind him, he heard Morgana's sharp intake of breath. No one had ever spoken to the princess with such casual acceptance. "I have a daughter about your age. Her name is Emma. She talks enough for both of us, honestly," he continued with a gentle smile. "But sometimes on the really hard days, she gets quiet too. And do you know what I learned? Sometimes people aren't silent because they can't speak. Sometimes they're silent because nobody's really listening." Isolde's eyes widened fractionally, the first reaction anyone had seen from her in months. Daniel settled more comfortably on the floor, his back against the wall, not demanding anything, just present. "So here's what I think. I think if you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Really listen. Not to fix you or cure you or break whatever everyone thinks is wrong with you. I'll just listen because you deserve to be heard. But if you never want to talk, that's okay too. You're still worth knowing. You're still important. You're still enough exactly as you are." Something happened in that room, something the magical sensors couldn't detect and the ancient artifacts couldn't measure. It was a simple, revolutionary act of acceptance without agenda. Isolde blinked, and a single tear rolled down her porcelain cheek. It was not speech, not yet, but it was the first crack in the dam that had held back 8 years of silence. And Daniel Carter, janitor and single father, had accomplished in 5 minutes what centuries of accumulated power could not. He had seen her not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be valued. The castle was in controlled chaos. Word of the humans' unprecedented effect on Princess, Isolde spread through the vampire court, like wildfire through dried autumn leaves. Ancient nobles who had lived to the fall of Rome gathered in shadow corners, debating whether this development was miraculous or dangerous. Seraphine posted additional guards outside Isolde's chambers, not to keep the child in, but to keep the suddenly interested courtiers out. Queen Morgana stood in her private study, surrounded by maps of old Portland and newer satellite images of the expanding city. She hadn't slept, though for a vampire, sleep was more meditation than necessity. Her mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, potential consequences of allowing a human deeper into their world. "You cannot seriously be considering this," Lord Thaddeus, her military commander, protested. His silver armor caught the candlelight as he paced. "A mortal? In the heart of our territory? He could expose us, threaten everything we've built." "He made her cry," Morgana said softly, her back to him. "In 8 years, my daughter's been a living statue. And this man, this ordinary janitor, made her feel something in minutes. Tell me, Thaddeus, which is more dangerous, allowing to continue, or losing this one chance to reach my child?" Thaddeus had no answer to that. Daniel, meanwhile, had been given guest quarters, a term that barely captured the reality of the suite he occupied. It was larger than his entire apartment, decorated with furniture that belonged in museums and tapestries that depicted events he vaguely recognized from history books. He hadn't slept either, his mind struggling to process the impossibility of where he was and what he'd witnessed. Vampires were real, magic was real, and somehow, impossibly, he was being asked to help. A soft knock at dawn brought Seraphine, carrying a silver tray with food, real human food, still warm. "The Queen requests your presence after you've eaten and rested. She wishes to discuss arrangements." "I need to call my daughter," Daniel said immediately. "Mrs. Chun will be worried. And Emma—" "It's been handled," Seraphine assured him. "Mrs. Chun received a call from what she believes is a legitimate family emergency service. Your daughter thinks you're helping a family in crisis, which," she added with a slight smile, "is entirely true. She's been told you might be away for a few days, but that you'll call every evening." We've also arranged for a stipend to be delivered to Mrs. Chun for Emma's care, and a bonus to your regular employers explaining a temporary family leave. Daniel stared. You people are terrifyingly efficient. We had centuries of practice at moving through the human world undetected. Please eat. You'll need your strength. The breakfast was American comfort food. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with jam, fresh orange juice. Simple things that felt absurdly normal in this supernatural setting. As Daniel ate, he thought about Emma, about the strangeness of his situation, about the haunted look in Isolde's eyes. That look, that desperate, trapped awareness, that was what decided him. He'd seen it before, reflected in Emma's eyes during the first year after her mother's death, when his daughter would wake screaming from nightmares she couldn't explain. He remembered the helplessness of not knowing how to reach her, how to pull her back from wherever grief had taken her. If he could spare another parent that feeling, vampire queen or not, he had to try. 2 hours later, he stood in what Morgana called her practical chamber, a room surprisingly modern compared to the Gothic grandeur elsewhere, with comfortable chairs, good lighting, and a table covered in notebooks and files. Mr. Carter. Morgana began, and there was a vulnerability in her formal tone that made her seem less like an immortal monarch and more like a desperate mother. I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. If you continue helping Isolde, you'll be drawn deeper into our world. There are dangers, political complications, enemies who might see you as a weakness to exploit. I can offer you protection, compensation, but I cannot offer you safety. Your Majesty, Daniel said carefully, testing the title. I appreciate the honesty, but I need to know something first. Why can't you reach her? You're her mother. You clearly love her. Why does it take an outsider? Morgana was silent for a long moment, her ancient eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries of loneliness. Because I am exactly what you said, an outsider to my own daughter. I was born in a different age, transformed into this existence before America was even imagined. I have ruled for 300 years, maintained order, commanded respect. But Isolde, she was born into this modern world, half vampire, half something else we still don't understand. Her father was... She paused, choosing words carefully. Human, a man I loved deeply and briefly, before he was taken by illness I couldn't cure. Daniel's expression softened with understanding. She's between worlds. Yes, neither fully vampire nor fully human. We raise her in our traditions, our ways, because it's all we know. But perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps she needs someone who understands a human side she's never been allowed to explore. What happened to her? Daniel asked. The trauma that stopped her speaking? Morgana's composure cracked. She was born silent. During her birth, something occurred. The midwives said she emerged staring at something none of them could see, as if witnessing a revelation or a horror beyond the veil. They tried everything to make her cry, to make her react, but she simply stared with those knowing eyes. She's been silent ever since, trapped in whatever she saw or learned in those first moments of existence. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. You think she saw something during birth? Something supernatural? We know she did, but what, we cannot determine. And until we understand what holds her silent, we cannot free her. Daniel thought about this, about a child born carrying impossible knowledge, isolated by the very nature of her existence. I'd like to try something, he said finally, but I need you to trust me, and I need access to certain things. Name them. First, I need to bring my daughter Emma here. The room erupted in protest from the guards Daniel hadn't noticed lurking in the shadows, but Morgana raised a hand for silence. Explain. Isolde is isolated. She's surrounded by adults, by immortals, by people who see her as a puzzle to solve. But she's still a child. Maybe what she needs isn't another expert or healer. Maybe she needs a friend, a peer, someone who doesn't expect anything from her except to exist. Seraphine stepped forward, her expression troubled. You would risk your own daughter? I would give my daughter the opportunity to help another child, Daniel corrected firmly. And I believe Isolde wouldn't hurt her. That intelligence in her eyes, that's not cruelty or danger. That's isolation. Morgana studied him with those violet eyes that had intimidated armies. You see, clearly for a mortal. Very well. Bring your daughter under guard and protection. What else do you need? Art supplies. Not fancy ones. Crayons, markers, paper, clay. Things kids use to express themselves. And time. No pressure, no expectations, no observers crowding us. Just space to be children. That seems too simple. The best things usually are Your Majesty. That evening, through a series of carefully orchestrated coincidences, Emma found herself on what she believed was a special field trip to a historical estate, where her daddy had gotten a temporary job. Mrs. Chun had been overjoyed at the generous payment and the chance for Emma to have an adventure. The little girl's eyes went wide as she took in the castle, which had been glamored to appear less supernatural to mortal eyes. Impressive but not impossible. Daddy, this place is like a fairy tale. It kind of is, sweetheart, Daniel said, kneeling to her level. There's a girl here, about your age. Her name is Isolde. She's very shy and she doesn't talk much. I thought maybe you could help her feel less alone. Would you like that? Emma, who had inherited her father's kind heart, nodded seriously. Is she sad? I think she might be, but I think you could help. When Emma first saw Isolde, there was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity and compassion. While the vampires watched from carefully hidden positions, Emma approached the silent princess with the confidence of childhood innocence. Hi, I'm Emma. Your dress is really pretty. Is purple your favorite color? She paused, not expecting an answer, then continued cheerfully. Mine's yellow, like sunshine. Do you like drawing? Daddy says we can draw together. Isolde stared at this whirlwind of human energy, this small creature who didn't seem to notice or care about anything except the simple offer of companionship. Emma plopped down on the floor, pulling out the crayons Daniel had provided, and began drawing with focused intensity. I'm drawing my rabbit, Mr. Hopscotch. Do you have any pets? Daddy says we can't have a real pet because our apartment is too small, but Mr. Hopscotch is stuffed, so he doesn't need much room. As Emma's cheerful monologue continued, something remarkable happened. Isolde's rigid posture gradually relaxed. Her eyes, which had been fixed on some distant horror, began to focus on the here and now, on the yellow-haired girl drawing rabbits and talking about everything and nothing with equal enthusiasm. Slowly, tentatively, like ice beginning to thaw, Isolde reached out and picked up a black crayon. From their hidden vantage point, Morgana gripped Seraphine's arm hard enough to bruise. Had Seraphine been human? She's engaging. She's actually engaging. Daniel sat quietly in the corner, not interfering, just present as both children drew. Emma narrated her entire artistic process, creating an atmosphere where communication didn't require speech. After 30 minutes, she looked at Isolde's drawing, a series of abstract shapes in black and purple that might have been shadows or might have been something more. That's really good. It looks mysterious, like a secret. Do you like secrets? Isolde looked at Emma, really looked at her, and for the first time in 8 years, the corners of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. Emma beamed. We're going to be friends, I can tell. Friends don't have to talk all the time. My daddy doesn't talk much when he's tired, but I know he loves me anyway. It's okay if you don't want to talk. We can just draw. Over the next 3 days, a routine developed. Daniel would bring Emma to the castle each morning. The girls would spend hours together, drawing, eventually introducing clay modeling, looking at picture books Emma brought from the library. Emma talked enough for both of them, filling the silence with stories about school, about Mr. Hopscotch, about her mama, who was in heaven but still watched over her. That last conversation proved crucial. On the third afternoon, as autumn rain pattered against the Gothic windows, Emma was molding clay into shapes while talking about her mother's death. I was really sad when Mama died, Emma said matter-of-factly, with the honesty only children possess. I didn't talk for a while, too. Everything felt too big and scary to put into words. Daddy said that was okay, that sometimes our hearts need quiet to heal. But then I realized Mama would be sad if I stayed quiet forever because she loved my voice. She used to say I had a voice like sunshine. Isolde stopped molding her own clay. Her hands trembled. Emma continued, innocent and profound. Daddy says everyone has something important to say, even if it takes a long time to figure out what it is. Do you think you have something important to say, Isolde? The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was charged, pregnant with possibility, as if the entire castle held its breath. Isolde opened her mouth. No sound came out, but the intention was clear. She was trying. After 8 years of absolute silence, she was trying to speak. Emma waited patiently, no pressure, just acceptance. A sound emerged, not words, not yet, but a small, broken noise, like a door long sealed finally beginning to open. Isolde's eyes filled with tears of frustration and hope mixed together. Daniel moved from his corner, kneeling beside both girls. "It's okay," he said softly. "That was brave. That was so brave, Isolde. You don't have to say everything at once. Just whatever feels right." Isolde looked at him, then at Emma, then back at her own shaking hands. When she tried again, the sound was clearer, a single syllable that might have been scared. Emma took her hand, without hesitation. "It's okay to be scared. Daddy and I get scared sometimes, too. But we're here, and we're not going anywhere." By evening, Morgana stood in her daughter's room, watching as Isolde, exhausted for the effort, slept more peacefully than she had in years. Small sounds had escaped throughout the day. Not conversation, not yet, but the beginning of something. The wall was cracking. She found Daniel in the corridor outside, waiting to take Emma home. "Thank you," she said simply, and the weight of an immortal's gratitude was almost overwhelming. "Whatever you need, whatever I can provide. Just let me keep coming." Daniel interrupted. "This isn't finished. She's found her voice's door, but we haven't opened it yet. There's something she's holding back, something she's afraid to say. We need to figure out what it is." Morgana nodded. "Then we continue. But Mr. Carter, Daniel, you should know that the court is taking notice. Not everyone views this development favorably. Some fear change. Others fear you specifically. Please be cautious." As Daniel left with a sleeping Emma in his arms, neither he nor the Queen noticed a shadow detaching from the darkness, nor the glowing red eyes that watched with growing concern as a human and his daughter departed into the rainy Portland night. Change was coming to the vampire realm, and not all immortals welcomed it. The attack came on the seventh night. Daniel had just finished his evening call with Emma, assuring her he'd be home tomorrow for the weekend, when the lights in his guest chamber flickered and died. The darkness that replaced them was absolute, not the natural darkness of night, but something older, something that seemed to swallow even the possibility of light. "Mr. Carter." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, cultured and cold. "You have become a problem." Daniel's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. "Who are you?" "I am Lord Cashin, First Elder of the High Council, and you, human, are disrupting an order that has stood for centuries. The princess's silence is not a curse. It is a mercy. There are things she knows, things she saw at her birth, that must not be spoken. Ever." A figure materialized in the shadows, tall, cadaverous, with eyes like chips of ice and an aura of such ancient power that the air itself seemed to freeze. "The Queen, in her maternal weakness, cannot see the danger. But I do. Some doors are better left closed." Daniel pressed his back against the wall, mind racing. "You're going to kill me? Death will be inefficient. I'm going to make you forget. Forget this place. Forget the princess. Forget everything supernatural you've witnessed. You'll return to your pathetic little life with your daughter, never knowing what you lost or why." Cashin raised a skeletal hand, and Daniel felt something probing at his mind. Cold tendrils trying to burrow into his memories, to erase everything that had happened since he walked through that gate. But then, something unexpected occurred. A voice, small but growing stronger, echoed through the chamber. And oh! Isolde stood in the doorway, her pale nightgown fluttering in a wind that came from nowhere, her dark hair swirling around her like living shadows. For the first time in her life, she had spoken loud enough for the sound to carry beyond a whisper. More remarkably, she was glowing, a soft, silvery light that seemed to emanate from within her, pushing back against Cashin's darkness. Impossible, Cashin hissed. Child, you don't understand what you're doing. You must remain silent. No, Isolde said again, her voice stronger now, 8 years of unspoken words finally finding their path. I've been silent because of you, because you all told my mother that what I saw should never be spoken. Morgana appeared behind her daughter, Seraphine and a squadron of guards flanking her. The queen's eyes blazed with fury as she took in the scene. Cashin's intrusion, Daniel's endangered state, her daughter finally speaking. Cashin, Morgana said, her voice dropping to a register that made the stones themselves tremble. You dare threaten a guest under my protection? You dare attempt to silence my daughter further? Your Majesty, you don't understand what the child saw. Cashin pleaded, his ancient confidence cracking. At her birth, when she emerged between life and death, she witnessed a prophecy of convergence. She saw the future, a future where the barriers between human and vampire collapse, where our kind is exposed, where chaos reigns. I placed a compulsion on her that night, to protect us all, to keep her from speaking these visions aloud. The human is breaking that compulsion, and if she speaks fully, she will doom us all. The revelation hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Morgana's expression transformed from fury to horror, to understanding in rapid succession. You curse my daughter? You imprison her in silence, not for her protection, but for yours. For all of ours. Cashin insisted. The prophecy. Prophecies, Morgana interrupted, her voice sharp as obsidian, are not absolute. They are warnings, possibilities, not certainties. You took my daughter's voice because you were afraid of change, because you are a coward who prefers comfortable darkness to uncertain light. She moved with supernatural speed, placing herself between Cashin and both Daniel and Isolde. You are hereby stripped of your title as First Elder and exiled from this court. Guards, remove him. As Cashin was dragged away, still protesting about doom and prophecies, Morgana knelt before her daughter. Isolde, my darling, my brave girl, you don't have to speak if you're not ready. But if you want to, if you need to, I will listen. Whatever you saw, whatever you know, we will face it together. Isolde looked at her mother, then at Daniel, who had slumped against the wall, recovering from Cashin's mental assault. When she spoke again, her voice was thin but clear, like a bell-long silence finally ringing true. I saw what could be, not what must be. I saw humans and vampires, together, not hiding, not enemies, just different kinds of people, sharing the world. She walked slowly toward Daniel, her small hand reaching for his. I saw someone like him, someone human, someone who would remind us what we'd forgotten. That being different doesn't mean being alone. That speaking truth can hurt, but silence hurts more. Tears streamed down Morgana's face, crystalline drops that sparkled in the returning candlelight. Is that all, my love? Is that the terrible prophecy Cashin feared? Isolde shook her head. There was more. I saw you, Mommy. Older, but not just surviving. Happy, really happy. And I was there too. And Emma, and Daddy Daniel, and so many others. Humans who knew about us. Vampires who didn't hide. It was scary because it was different, but it was also beautiful. She turned her dark eyes to Daniel, ancient wisdom in a child's face. I couldn't speak because every time I tried, the compulsion Cashin placed hurt so much, like fire in my throat. But you made me want to try anyway, because you showed me that being seen, really seen, was worth any pain, that being understood was worth the risk. Daniel found himself crying too, this exhausted janitor caught in a supernatural drama he never asked for. Isolde, you are the bravest person I've ever met. Do you know that? 8 years. You carried this alone for 8 years. Not alone, Isolde whispered. Never alone. I could feel Mommy's love, even when I couldn't speak it back. I knew. Morgana pulled her daughter into an embrace, rocking her gently as sobs. 8 years' worth of trapped emotion finally broke free. The queen looked at Daniel over Isolde's dark hair, gratitude and something else in her ancient eyes. You did the unthinkable, Mr. Carter. You offered love without expectation, acceptance without condition. In a world of immortals who have forgotten what true compassion looks like, you reminded us. You saved my daughter not with magic or power, but with simple, genuine humanity. I just treated her like she mattered, Daniel said quietly, because she does. Over the next week, Isolde's voice grew stronger. The compulsion Cashin had placed, now broken by sheer will in support of those who loved her, lost its power. She spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence. Her words came in floods and trickles, stories about the things she'd observed in silence, questions about the world beyond the castle walls, and increasingly, questions about Emma and the human life she'd never experienced. The vampire court, meanwhile, was in upheaval. Cashin's exile had revealed a deep philosophical divide between those who believed in eternal isolation and those who wondered if Isolde's prophecy might not be doom but opportunity. Younger vampires especially were intrigued. They had lived through the internet age, watched humanity connect globally, and wondered what it might mean to step out of the shadows. Morgana called a council meeting, one that Daniel was surprisingly invited to attend. He stood in a marble hall surrounded by immortals who had witnessed the fall of Rome, the birth of nations, the turn of centuries, feeling absurdly out of place in his borrowed formal clothes. "We face a choice," Morgana announced to the assembled elders and nobles. "We can continue as we have, maintaining our secrecy through fear and compulsion, hiding from a human world that grows more technologically advanced and harder to hide from with each passing year. Or we can begin to imagine a different future, one where we cautiously, carefully begin to integrate, to reveal ourselves to select humans who might understand, who might help us navigate coexistence. The risk," Lord Thaddeus began, "is no greater than the risk of continuing to hide in a world of satellite imaging, DNA testing, and social media." Seraphine interrupted. "The human child, Emma, knows. Mrs. Chun, the neighbor, suspects. Daniel knows everything. Yet none of them have exposed us. Perhaps it's time we trusted that not all humans will react with pitchforks and fire. We could start small," suggested Lady Vivian, a vampire who had once been a diplomat in Victorian England. "Controlled revelation. Selected humans. Those like Mr. Carter, who have proven their discretion and compassion. Create a network of aware mortals who can help us navigate modern human society while we protect them in return." The debate raged for hours. Daniel stayed quiet, knowing this was not his decision to influence. But when the Queen asked him directly for his perspective, he spoke from the heart. "In my world, the regular human world, we're all struggling with differences. Race, religion, nationality, orientation. We're slowly, painfully learning that diversity doesn't have to mean division. That different kinds of people can coexist if they're willing to see each other's humanity. Or, in your case, personhood." He looked around at the ancient faces watching him. "You're afraid of being monsters in human eyes. But monsters don't worry about morality. Monsters don't love their children so much they'd seek help from strangers. You're not monsters. You're just people with different needs, living longer lives. And I think if you gave humans a chance, carefully, yes, but genuinely, you might be surprised by how many would extend understanding rather than violence." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was definitive. The Vampire Court Portland would begin the Convergence Project, a centuries-long initiative to gradually reveal supernatural existence to humanity, starting with a carefully selected group of human allies. Daniel Carter, janitor and single father, was appointed as the first human liaison. On his first day officially serving in this impossible role, Daniel brought Emma to the castle for what he promised would be the truth. They sat in Isolde's chamber, now redecorated with both Gothic elegance and cheerful children's artwork, and he explained everything. Emma listened with wide eyes, processing the impossible with the flexible reality only children possess. When he finished, she turned to Isolde and asked simply, "So you're a vampire princess?" "Half vampire," Isolde clarified, her voice still soft but no longer silent. "The other half is human, like you." "Cool. Can you turn into a bat?" Isolde giggled. An actual giggle, the first Morgana had ever heard from her daughter. "No, that's just in movies." but I can see really well in the dark. And I'm very strong for my size. Can we still be friends? Even though you're, like, supernatural royalty and I'm just regular Emma? Emma, Isolde said seriously, taking her friend's hand. You were my friend when you thought I was just weird and quiet. Why would being a vampire princess change that? Emma considered this, then shrugged. Good point. Do you want to teach me any vampire stuff? Like, can you teach me to walk really quietly? That would be great for sneaking cookies. As the girls dissolved into giggles and planning, Daniel and Morgana stood by the window, watching the Portland skyline as twilight painted it gold and purple. This is just the beginning, Morgana said quietly. There will be challenges, resistance from both sides, dangers we can't yet anticipate. Probably, Daniel agreed. But isn't that true of anything worth doing? You're trying to change centuries of tradition. I'm trying to raise a daughter in a world that gets more complicated every day. We're both taking risks because the alternative, staying safe but stagnant, isn't really living. Morgana smiled, an expression that transformed her ancient features into something warm and genuinely hopeful. You know, Mr. Carter, when I first reached out to Human World, I expected to find a therapist, perhaps, or a scholar, someone impressive by conventional standards. Instead, I found a janitor with a tired face and a kind heart. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Call me Daniel. And for what it's worth, I think the universe knew exactly what it was doing. They stood in comfortable silence. Two parents from different worlds who had found common ground in the love for their children and the hope for a better future. Behind them, Emma and Isolde had pulled out the art supplies, already designing what Emma insisted should be the official flag of human-vampire friendship. It features sun and moon together, surrounded by stars, with two figures, one pale, one tan, holding hands. It's perfect, Isolde declared, her voice clear and certain. And for the first time in her young life, she meant it. 3 months later, winter had settled over Portland with unusual ferocity, blanketing the city in snow and ice that transformed the urban landscape into something from a fairy tale, appropriate, Daniel thought. Given how much his life had shifted into the realm of the impossible made real, the Convergence Project had begun in earnest, and Daniel found himself navigating two worlds simultaneously. By day, he still worked at the community center, though now as a full-time coordinator rather than a janitor, funded by the Vampire Court's discreet financial support. By night, he attended meetings in the castle, helping to identify potential human allies and strategizing how to bridge two civilizations that had existed in parallel for millennia. Emma had adapted with the resilience of childhood, treating her friendship with Isolde as simultaneously completely normal and absolutely magical. She'd been sworn to secrecy, a responsibility she took with solemn seriousness, though she told Daniel privately that keeping such a big secret was harder than not eating Halloween candy early. Isolde, meanwhile, had blossomed in ways that astonished everyone who had known her during her silent years. She spoke freely now, her voice gaining confidence daily. More than that, she laughed, asked questions, and displayed a curiosity about the world that had been locked away for so long. Morgana often found herself simply watching her daughter in wonder, marveling at the personality that was finally, beautifully, emerging. But the transformation wasn't without complications. The first challenge came from an unexpected quarter: human bureaucracy. Emma's school had begun asking questions about her new friend that Emma mentioned constantly, but who never appeared for playdates or school events. Mrs. Chun, despite her discretion, had let slip to other neighbors that Daniel had somehow come into money and new employment. Rumors were spreading, the kind of low-level curiosity that could, if left unchecked, lead to exactly the kind of scrutiny the Convergence Project sought to avoid. We need to make Isolde real, Daniel explained at a strategy meeting in late January. Not vampire real, she is that, but real in human systems. She needs an identity, records, a plausible backstory. Otherwise, she's a ghost, and ghosts attract attention. Lady Vivian, who had taken charge of human integration logistics, nodded thoughtfully. We've created false identities before, but never for one so young. The challenge is creating a history that can withstand scrutiny while explaining her unique situation. What if we don't hide it? Seraphine suggested. Not all of it, of course. But what if Isolde is enrolled in Emma's school as a child with a rare medical condition, extreme photosensitivity, perhaps explaining her pallor and need for special accommodations? We've created false medical records before. Her mother could be a wealthy widow, which Morgana essentially is, who has kept her daughter sheltered due to health concerns, but now wishes to socialize her more normally. That could work, Daniel mused. It explains her differences without revealing the truth, and it gives her access to normal childhood experiences, school, friends, activities, things every kid deserves. Morgana, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. Would you be safe? In a building full of human children, without my direct protection? She'd be safer than you think, Daniel assured her. Modern schools have security protocols, and we could arrange for Seraphine to take a position there, maybe as a special aide or nurse. Plus, Emma would be there. Kids protect their friends fiercely. What convinced Morgana, ultimately, was Isolde herself. When presented with the possibility, the young princess's eyes lit up with excitement that transcended fear. I could go to real school, like Emma describes, with books and art class and recess. If you want to, darling, Morgana said gently, but it would be different from your tutoring here. There would be rules, schedules, other children who might not understand you. I've been alone for 8 years, Mommy, Isolde said with wisdom beyond her age. I think I'd like to try being around people now, even if it's hard sometimes. Daniel taught me that being seen is worth the risk. The enrollment process proved surreal. Daniel accompanied Morgana, glamored to appear less supernaturally beautiful and more normally wealthy, to Morrison Elementary School, where they met with Principal Hayes. The forged medical records, the substantial donation to the school, and Isolde's genuine eagerness won the day. She would start after winter break, in Emma's second-grade class. The night before Isolde's first day of school, Daniel found her in the castle library, surrounded by books about human children and school experiences, studying them with the intensity of a general preparing for battle. Nervous? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Terrified, Isolde admitted. What if they don't like me? What if I say something wrong? What if... She trailed off, old fears of silence creeping back into her voice. Daniel reached over and gently closed the book she was reading. Isolde, look at me. You've already done the hardest thing. You found your voice. Everything else is just practice. And you know what? Some kids might not like you. That's okay. Not everyone has to be friends with everyone. But the ones who matter, the ones who are worth knowing, they'll see you for who you are, smart, kind, brave, just like Emma did. Will you be there? If I need you, I'll be a phone call away. Always. And Emma will be right beside you. You're not alone anymore, remember? Isolde nodded, then surprised him by leaning over to hug him, a gesture she was still learning but getting better at. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For helping me find my voice. For being... She paused, searching for words. For being your friend? Daniel offered. For being the dad I needed when I needed one, Isolde corrected softly. The first day of school was chaos orchestrated as carefully as a military operation. Seraphine, posing as Miss Sarah, the new school nurse, was stationed strategically. Morgana watched through spell mirrors in the castle, ready to intervene if needed. Daniel took a personal day from his own job, waiting anxiously by his phone. Emma, for her part, took her role as Isolde's guide and protector with admirable seriousness. She explained to her classmates that morning that a really special friend was joining them, someone who might seem different but was the best person you'll ever meet. When Isolde walked into the classroom, dressed in carefully chosen clothes that were nice but not so expensive as to alienate, her dark hair pulled back, her pale features composed, a hush fell over the second graders. She looked ethereal, otherworldly, like a character stepped out of a storybook. "Hi," she said softly, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm Isolde. I have a condition that makes me sensitive to sunlight, so I might seem different, but I really want to make friends and learn with all of you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Emma jumped up, ran to Isolde, and took her hand. "You can sit with me, and at recess, we can play in the shade by the big tree. It'll be great." The ice broke. Another girl, Maya, raised her hand and said, "I like your name. It sounds like a princess." A boy named James asked if her condition was like being a superhero with weakness, which made Isolde laugh and relax. By lunch, she was surrounded by curious, accepting children who peppered her with questions she answered truthfully about her rare disease, her homeschooling, her interests. The only difficult moment came when a boy named Derek, known as a class bully, made a cruel comment about Isolde being a vampire or something, because you're so pale and weird. The classroom went silent. Isolde froze, terror and irony warring on her face. He'd stumbled on the truth as an insult, not knowing how close he'd come. But before she could respond, Emma stood up, face flushed with righteous anger. "That's really mean, Derek. Isolde has a medical condition, and making fun of someone for something they can't control is bullying. And, you know what? Even if she was a vampire, which is ridiculous because those aren't real, she'd still be nicer than you're being right now." Other children nodded. Maya added, "Yeah, Derek, not cool." Even the teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had been briefed on Isolde's supposed condition, intervened with a gentle but firm reprimand about kindness and inclusion. Derek, faced with unified disapproval, mumbled an apology, and Isolde, watching children defend her without knowing the full truth, felt something powerful bloom in her chest, belonging. That night, the castle was filled with celebration. Isolde recounted every detail of her day to her mother, the words tumbling out in a cascade of excitement. She'd learned about fractions, played tag at recess, carefully in the shade, eaten cafeteria pizza, which she declared weird but good, and made 3 new friends besides Emma. It was perfect, Mommy. Well, not perfect. Derek was mean and I got confused during math, and the fluorescent lights gave me a headache. But it was real. It was wonderfully, beautifully real. Morgana held her daughter close, tears of joy streaming down her ancient face. "I'm so proud of you, my brave girl. You're experiencing things I never could, building bridges I never imagined possible." As weeks turned to months, Isolde's integration continued to succeed beyond anyone's expectations. She excelled in her studies. Centuries of vampire education had given her advantages, though she was careful not to outshine her classmates too dramatically. She joined the art club, where her haunting drawings attracted positive attention rather than concern. She attended birthday parties, playdates, and even convinced Morgana to host a sleepover at the castle, heavily glamored and supervised, with the girls confined to the most normal-looking wing. But the Convergence Project extended far beyond one child's school experience. Daniel, working with Lady Vivian's team, had begun identifying potential human allies, carefully vetted individuals in positions of influence or expertise who might be receptive to the truth about supernatural existence. The first intentional revelation came in March. Dr. Sarah Chun, a bioethicist at Oregon Health and Science University and a distant relative of Mrs. Chun, had been selected after months of careful observation. She was intelligent, open-minded, and had published papers on coexistence between different communities. She was also, unknowingly, treating a vampire patient, an elderly vampire suffering from a rare blood disease that vampire healers couldn't cure. Daniel arranged a consultation, about an unnamed patient with unique medical needs. Dr. Chen arrived at the castle, expecting perhaps a meeting with wealthy eccentrics. What she got instead was Morgana, in her full supernatural glory, explaining calmly and clearly that vampires existed, that they needed medical expertise human doctors possessed, and that she was being offered a choice: walk away with memories gently altered, or stay and become part of something unprecedented. Dr. Chen's response, after the initial shock wore off, was unexpectedly pragmatic. "I have about 1,000 questions, starting with, how is this biologically possible, and ending with, what do you need from me? But mostly I'm wondering why you're revealing this now, after centuries of secrecy." "Because isolation is no longer sustainable," Morgana explained. "And because a human, a janitor with no particular qualifications except a good heart, showed us that your kind is capable of more compassion than we gave you credit for." We're hoping you'll help us prove he was right. Dr. Chen looked at Daniel, sitting quietly to the side, and laughed, a slightly hysterical but genuine sound. A janitor saved a vampire princess and started an interspecies integration project? That's either the most absurd or most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Both, Daniel confirmed. Definitely both. Dr. Chin became the first official human member of the Convergence Project's medical division. Within weeks, she recruited 2 trusted colleagues, and they'd begun work on understanding vampire biology from a scientific perspective, seeking ways to help vampires with conditions that supernatural means couldn't address. But success bred complications. Not all vampires approved of the increasing human presence in their world. A faction calling themselves the Purists, led by vampires who had survived the witch trials and fear human discovery more than death itself, began agitating for a return to strict isolation. They saw Isolde's integration as dangerous precedent and Daniel as a corrupting influence. The confrontation came in May, during a full court gathering. Lord Ezekiel, a vampire who claimed lineage back to biblical times, stood before the assembled nobles and made his case. "We are predators consorting with prey," he thundered, his voice echoing off marble walls. "The queen allows her daughter to attend human school, exposes her to disease and danger. She permits humans into our innermost sanctums, trusts them with secrets that could destroy us. And for what? The sentimental fantasy that 2 fundamentally incompatible species can coexist? Humans fear what they don't understand, and they destroy what they fear. History proves this again and again. Morgana rose, her presence commanding despite the opposition. History also proves that isolation leads to stagnation and eventual extinction. The human world is changing, Lord Ezekiel. They have technology that can detect what magic cannot hide. They have communication networks that spread information globally in seconds. We can either prepare for inevitable discovery by building alliances now, or we can wait until discovery happens on their terms, when we'll be unprepared and vulnerable. The queen speaks wisdom, but acts from weakness," Ezekiel challenged. "She's blinded by maternal love for a half-breed child, influenced by a human who's bewitched her with his common man charm. This is not strategy. This is sentiment masquerading as policy." Before Morgana could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. "I'm not a half-breed. I'm both. Completely." Isolde stood up from where she'd been sitting with Emma in the gallery, reserved for children and guests. She descended the steps with dignity beyond her years, her hand holding Emma's. 2 children facing down an immortal council with courage born of friendship. "Lord Ezekiel, you say humans and vampires are fundamentally incompatible, but Emma and I are friends. Real friends. She knows what I am, and she doesn't fear me. She protects me. When Derek called me weird, she defended me. When I didn't understand a math problem, she helped me. When I was sad about not being able to play in the direct sunlight, she suggested we build a blanket fort in the shade and pretend it was a cave system. She didn't see me as a monster or a curiosity. She saw me as Isolde, her friend who happens to be part vampire." Emma, finding her own courage, added in her small voice, "And Isolde shared her snacks with me even though she doesn't like human food much. She helped me with my art project, even though she's way better at drawing than me. She told scary stories at the sleepover that were really cool, but not so scary I had nightmares. That's what friends do. They don't care if you're different. They care if you're kind." The simple testimony of 2 8-year-old girls accomplished what political arguments could not. Even the hardened skeptics in the room found themselves softening, reconsidering. Children, with their uncomplicated honesty, had cut through centuries of fear and prejudice to reveal a fundamental truth. Commonality matters more than difference. Lord Ezekiel, finding his support crumbling, played his final card. "Then let us test the supposed friendship. Let us see if it survives truth. Girl," he addressed Emma directly, his voice cold, "do you know what vampires consume to survive? Have you seen your friend feed?" Emma looked confused. "You mean blood?" "Isolde told me. She has special drinks that are like blood, but from blood banks, not from hurting people. She said it's like how I eat chicken, but I don't kill the chicken myself. Someone does it responsibly so I can have nutrition. What's the big deal?" The absolute normalcy with which Emma discussed vampire nutrition, reducing it to a level of mundane practical consideration, was so unexpected that several council members actually laughed. The tension, while not eliminated, eased considerably. Ezekiel, defeated by a child's pragmatism, retreated to the back of the chamber. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was definitive. The Convergence Project would continue, with increased security measures but without retreat. As the council dispersed, Daniel found himself on the castle balcony, watching the Portland sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Morgana joined him. Two exhausted parents, sharing a moment of peace after the day's intensity. "Your daughter is remarkable," Morgana said softly. "Her acceptance, her courage to speak before the council, that came from you, from the values you've instilled." "She's just being herself," Daniel replied. "Kids are amazing that way. They don't carry all the baggage adults accumulate. They see people as people." "Is that what you see when you look at me?" Morgana asked, an unexpected vulnerability in her voice. "A person? Not a vampire, not a queen, just a person?" Daniel turned to face her fully, seeing not the supernatural being of legend, but the woman who had been alone for centuries, the mother who had spent 8 years desperately seeking help for her child, the leader trying to navigate an impossible situation with grace. "I see someone who loves her daughter enough to ask a stranger for help," he said honestly. "Someone who's brave enough to change when change is terrifying. Someone who's trying to do right by her people, while also doing right by her child. Yeah, Morgana, I see a person. An extraordinary person, but a person nonetheless." Something shifted between them in that moment. An acknowledgement of connection that went beyond the project, beyond their roles as liaison and queen. It was not quite romance, not yet, but something deeper, genuine understanding between two souls who had found each other across the chasm of different worlds. The convergence isn't just about vampires and humans learning to coexist, Morgana said thoughtfully. It's about individuals learning to see past categories to the person beneath. "You taught me that. You and your wonderful daughter. We learn from a soul too," Daniel countered. "About courage, about the power of finding your voice, about how being different doesn't mean being less." Below them, in the castle courtyard, Isolde and Emma were playing, a vampire princess and a human child, laughing together in the twilight. Other vampire children, encouraged by Isolde's example, had begun to join them, and if Daniel squinted, he could imagine a future where the scene was normal, where the barriers between species had eroded not through grand gestures, but through friendships, one connection at a time. The Convergence Project would continue for years, decades, perhaps centuries. There would be setbacks and challenges, resistance from both sides, moments of fear and doubt. But it had begun, truly begun, because a silent child found her voice and a single father offered unconditional acceptance. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Daniel felt Emma's future spreading out before him. Not the simple life he once imagined, but something richer, stranger, more meaningful. She would grow up knowing magic was real, that the impossible was possible, that bridges could be built between the most unlikely places. And Isolde, who had spent 8 years trapped in silence, would grow up knowing that her voice mattered, that her vision of a shared future was worth fighting for, that she was exactly who she needed to be. "Thank you," Morgana said again, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through, everything yet to come, for doing the unthinkable, for being exactly what we needed when we needed it most. "Thank you for trusting me," Daniel replied, "for taking a chance on an ordinary guy who was just trying to help." "You were never ordinary, Daniel Carter," Morgana said with a smile. "Ordinary men don't change the course of civilizations. Ordinary men don't see past centuries of fear to the possibility of friendship. Ordinary men don't teach vampire princesses that being heard is worth any risk. You're many things, but ordinary has never been one of them." As night fell completely and the castle lights began to glow, Daniel headed inside to collect Emma and return to their apartment. Their normal, human apartment that now held supernatural secrets. Tomorrow, Isolde would go to school, Dr. Chen would continue her research, and the Convergence Project would take another small step forward. The Vampire Queen's daughter had spoken, breaking 8 years of silence with words of hope and prophecy. And the single dad who had done the unthinkable, who had simply offered love, acceptance, and genuine listening, had helped not just one child find her voice, but 2 species find common ground. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is the simplest. Seeing someone truly, accepting them completely, and believing that connection is possible even across the widest divides. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.